Hello, everybody, to the world. This is the Voyage of Philosophy, Dr.Ahn's YouTube Philosophy Classroom. Today, Unit 30, the Affirmation and the Negation, the comparison of the concept of the absolute by Spinoza and Hegel. Hegel's strong self-assurance about his philosophy is well expressed in the preface to his work, The Phenomenology of Spirit. The theme of it is, in a word, the absolute. The absolute is, in other expression, the absolute knowledge. Therefore, the concept of the absolute by Hegel doesn't connote the religious or personal meaning like a superhero or the savior. It means the absolute as the object of knowledge or philosophy. Therefore, the meaning of the absolute is true or as it really is. Consequently, Hegel's philosophy is the knowledge about the absolute, namely the absolute knowledge. However, the concept of this absolute knowledge is not different from the previous metaphysics. The traditional metaphysics can be regarded as the fundamental and the general knowledge about God, universe, and man. In this regard, Hegel would like to reform the traditional metaphysics not substantially but formally, methodologically. Conclusively, the methodological reform of philosophy is called the absolute knowledge by Hegel. In order to specify the meaning of Hegel's notion of the absolute, we should first consider the critical philosophy of Immanuel Kant. Kant considered the previous metaphysics as dogmatism because it goes beyond the limit of the human cognitive faculty. Kant called the entity of the previous metaphysics as a transcendent object. He invalidated the reality of those objects. In this regard, Hegel's assertion of the absolute object referred to the reunification of the subject and object which Kant separated. Even if Kant denied the possibility of the traditional metaphysics, he affirmed the empirical scientific knowledge. He investigated the condition of the empirical science, which was called transcendental philosophy. Kant found the ground of experience finally in the synthetic unity of the manifold through perception, self-consciousness. Namely, it is the function of transcendental consciousness which unified the given manifold subjective empirical material into the objective unity. This is called supreme principle of cognition by Kant. However, the post-Kant philosophers ask the more fundamental questions. How can the manifold actually change into the unity? Fichte was the one who tried to solve such a problem. In his Science of Knowledge, Fichte tried to deduce the categories of the understanding from the activity of absolute ego. Therefore, the unity of the one and the many, the ego and the world, and the subject and object may be called the absolute. Hegel approached the problem of the absolute from various perspectives. He found first a model of absolute philosophy in the philosophy of Spinoza. Spinoza's book Ethics deals with metaphysics, the philosophy of the absolute. The hitherto scholastic philosophy established a comprehensive system of God, the world, and the man without going through the epistemological criticism which leads to dogmatism. The principle of Descartes' I think, therefore I am, came to be the criterion of truth as the self-certainty. Anything without reference to the subject as I is to be doubted and denied. However, Spinoza tried to lay the foundation of metaphysics even if he knew well the thought of Descartes. Spinoza began his metaphysics with the concept of substance, and he proceeded it with a mathematical way. In this regard, Spinoza can be named father of modern metaphysics. Hegel, who tried to overcome the dualism of Kant's thought, fidelity said that of the thing in itself and the appearance, received the philosophy of Spinoza as his mother, either Spinozism or no philosophy, said Hegel. There would be no philosophy except for Spinozism. Hegel writes further, he who begins to philosophize must bathe in the ether of the one substance. The substance by Spinoza is what exists in itself and conceived through itself, is the definition of the substance by Spinoza. Normally, the meaning of the substance is what is invariably and identical in all its change and has its attributes. For example, the metal is an important example of the substance, namely, the salt is a substance. Salt is white and salty. The salt is a substance. Whiteness and saltiness are its attributes. Furthermore, the concept of the substance is also the basically philosophical concept by Aristotle. By the way, what is most important by Spinoza is that his substance refers to God. God is substance. That is, God alone exists for itself, and the rest other than God depends on the God in order to exist. They are derivative from God. These derivative beings are called the finite or modification by Spinoza. On the contrary, the God is infinite. The relevant and important thought of Spinoza regarding Hegel is that God is infinite and the God or substance is affirmative. These two things are most important for Hegel. On the other hand, the finite connotes the partial negation of its nature. The infinite being that is the substance is absolute affirmation of its nature. Here is Spinoza quotation. As a finite existence involves a partial negation, and the infinite existence is the absolute affirmation of the given nature. Spinoza Ethics. This state of affairs can be easily verified through the experience of the surroundings. The birth of life run toward negation, that is, the death. The sky is unlimited, infinite. Among the visible things, the sky is the most congruent with the concept of the infinite. Of course, it is especially infinite. Therefore, the famous Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu said, the sky and the earth is infinite. 노자왈 천장지구. Lao Tzu's thought is, however, limited because we know that the earth is not infinite. The sky or the cosmos might not be unlimited, according to the recent scientific research. Spinoza thought that the infinite is in itself and for itself. It is invariable substance which never becomes or destroys. Therefore, it is evident that the infinite has no negation of its nature. Hegel and his acquaintances apprehended absolute of Spinoza as the absolute. The representative person of Hegel's acquaintances was Jacobi, who found the absolute is not to be recognized. The absolute or God is the object of the belief, not that of cognition. Chapter 2, Substance, Subject, and Negation. The concept of substance by Spinoza is represented as the affirmation of its nature as over mentioned. However, Hegel took the negation as the essence of his philosophy. This is another Copernican turn after Kant's transcendental turn in the history of the philosophy. In his preface to his masterwork, Phenomenology of Spirit, it reads as follows. The truth is sought and expressed not only as a substance but also as a subject. It is necessary to apprehend the absolute as a subject. Hegel could not give up the substance of Spinoza in order to build his system of philosophy. However, his characteristic lies in that substance is regarded as a subject or negation. The subject is actually a kind of substance. All being is a substance. Hegel said also, the living substance is a subject. Hegel's concept of subject has, however, nothing to do with the personal living God as the object of the Christianity. That is, Hegel's concept of the subject is different from the God as a theistic substance who has a will, intelligence, and power. Hegel's subject has a rather relation with the Spinozistic theory of substance and attributes. The two important attributes of substance are thought and extension. Furthermore, according to Spinoza, the attributes are apprehended by the finite human understanding. That is, they are not conceived through themselves, like the substance. Substance and attributes are in the external relationship. Herein lies the problematic of Spinoza's system. From this viewpoint, the modern metaphysics of the Spinoza can be seen as an important, imperfect synthesis of the traditional philosophy and the Cartesian subjectivism. That is, the thinking ego is not coherently connected with the concept of substance. The difficulty originates from Spinoza's transformation of two substances of Descartes, that is, less cogitans and less extensa, into two attributes of the one substance. In opposition to Spinoza, the two substances of the Descartes are finite. Only the divine substance, God, is infinite. Under these circumstances, Hegel tried to transform the metaphysics of Spinoza into the subjectivism, the absolute not only as a substance but also as subject. In other words, he made an effort to turn the objective metaphysics of Spinoza into a subjective metaphysics of Descartes as Fichte did it before. Chapter 3: The Connection of Spinozism and Cartesianism through Fichte. The philosophy of the absolute is not different from the previous metaphysics. However, it became more difficult to found metaphysics in modern times. Further, the metaphysics is not possible without taking into consideration of consciousness or ego. It was Fichte that firstly endeavored to found ontology on the basis of ego. He named his new ontology science of knowledge, which means that it lays a foundation of all the knowledge, including nature science. The fundamental of Fichte philosophy is a transformation of thinking ego by Descartes. Only the ego is not fixed stationary, but acting, moving. That is, the ego transferred to its opposition, namely non-ego. In this process, the most important categories of the ontology or metaphysics are developed. The categories of the reality, substantiality, and the causality. However, the actual process of the science of knowledge is enormously complicated. Fichte's prime student, Schelling, understood the mutual determination of the ego and non-ego as the objectification of the absolute ego. Hegel, in his part, represented Fichte's acting ego as the subject. Therefore, Hegel's slogan to apprehend substance as a subject or to think of the absolute as a subject is revealed. In other words, Hegel conceived the godly substance of Spinoza as acting subject or absolute subject. Furthermore, he declared activity of ego as a negativity. Here, the meaning of the negativity is not same as the usual meaning of it, that is, falsity or objection, but opposition of itself. Logically saying, ego equals non-ego. A equals not A. It is the violation of the law of non-contradiction. is the creation of a dialectical logic. Therefore, the substance is subject and negativity. However, the development of knowledge in the phenomenology of spirit are not always consist of dialectic. As a matter of fact, the great modality of the presentation in the phenomenology is represented as the way of trial and error method. For example, the first chapter of phenomenology is titled Sensuous Certainty and Disended Opinion. This knowledge type is asserting the immediate individual cognition of its object. And the immediate cognition is truth, he thinks. However, in this process, the sensual certainty comes to be aware of its incongruity of its first intention and the arrived reality. After the bitter failure of cognition, the consciousness alters the object of its knowledge. The knowledge refers to the universal. During this process, the type of knowledge changes too. Vidali said, from sensual certainty to the perception. Therefore, this process is experimental and empirical rather than dialectical. This negativity Hegel calls the discrepancy between the knowledge and its object, or the ego and its object in German. This negative zugleich als ungleich des Ichs zum Gegenstande. From this perspective is to be understood. The true is the whole, but the whole is something other than the essence consummating itself through its development. Of the absolute, it must be said that it is essentially a result, that only in its end is it what is true is. Phenomenology of Spirit, paragraph 20. From this, the same viewpoint, Hegel referred to the way of despair and the way of the self-consummating skepticism. The reason is that, as over mentioned in the beginning, the knowledge doesn't coincide with its object. The consciousness experiences always the failure of cognition. However, the failure and despair brings not only negative but also positive result. The positive side of discrepancy or difference is that the creation of the new form of knowledge and its corresponding object. Finally, the perfect identity of knowledge and its object is fully consummated. This way goes through science, art, and religion. The last stage of the cognition is the philosophy. This is the absolute knowledge. Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit showed the way of a scientific experience that is a kind of trial and error method. But the difference of a Phenomenology of Spirit and the trial and error method is that the former experienced the change not only of subject but also of object as well, as above in the case of sensuous certainty shows. Whereas trial and error is a problem-solving method in which multiple attempts are made to reach a solution. That is, in case of trial and error method, the object is from the beginning determinate, constant, though not variable. Object is always fixed. The genuine method of the Hegel philosophy consists of the dialectic. The whole process of dialectic is, in other words, self-movement of the substance. This movement of substance is called the subject or negativity. Unlike Spinoza, who at first confirmed the determination of the substance and proceed from the determination to other problems, Hegel begins from the most empirical fact, that is the sensuous certainty. However, the concept of the experience is somewhat different from the normal use of it, as above mentioned. The experience is that of development of subject and object as well. The subject and the object are represented as identical and then different. In his early thought, Hegel spoke of the identity of identity and non-identity. This is represented in the phenomenology as the subject or negativity. Thank you very much. Vielen Dank. This is the end of the lecture. See you next time. I love you all.